There is concern by the Adirondack communities that they're instituting a conservation easement bill again through the assembly. And I think it's something that we spoke about once before. And I think any community in APA, we should oppose this bill moving forward. I'll have more information after we have meetings next week, APA local government, but it's very restrictive for communities in the park. And it's put forth by the environmental committee, and I think there's a Senate or Assembly bill been introduced, but we need to, I know the Adirondack communities will be opposed to it.
Oh, this is the
More zoning restrictions.
blue line, something like that, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I thank you for bringing that up, and I agree. So,
But I'll get you the information.
do we want to put that on
Put it as a
discussion or
discussion
or-
point next time.
for pending items?
Yeah, so we'll have more information.
So we don't have to act today.
No.
I mean, I have been
No,
following
because
it.
I don't have the resolution.
All right, thank you, Chairman Gary. That I have been following that, and that's something that we all should look into because it does affect all you northern communities for sure.
Any community in the park.
Well, any community, and Queensbury's got some in the park. Yes, Supervisor Thomas.
Yeah, it's basically a taking of private property.
Yeah, I'm not in really favor the government stepping in and doing that. And I think there's a lot of restrictions we already have up there, but that's just my opinion. So the Supervisor Rossi. Just waving to me. All right. Supervisor Leggett.
This has been in the work for years, and our former supervisor, Matt Simpson, had worked with others on it as well and had come to a good compromise on the whole thing. But then I do believe some of the language has changed over time. And also the APA has their own take on it as well, and sees that it could be a restriction on their own activities when it's imposed by the state as an overlay onto their own authority. So it's a complicated issue.
Yeah, it's
But with the language before us, it would give us a better idea on what there is to oppose or support.
Well, thank you for bringing us more information to us. So we'll put that down on the pending items and discussion. We don't have any action on the agenda, but we do have some discussion items. So I'm going to hand this over. Well, first we got the proposed solar pilot agreement with the AC Pilot. Lexi.
That is on, and I'm thinking that possibly our county attorney can speak on this. I'm not really involved. I know that he is, I believe, in the process of coming up with a pilot agreement. And he has had some communication with the town as well as the attorneys for AC Power, but I'd rather let him speak for his office.
This is the town of Queensbury.
Yeah, the project is a project in the town of Queensbury. Town of Queensbury is negotiating a pilot with AC Power. The county is going to propose that we mirror or try to mirror the terms that are reached with the town of Queensbury and AC Power. But they're still in negotiations. They have not finalized the terms. So once that occurs, I'll have more information to go forward on that pilot. I know the developer was hoping to get approval by the end of March, I believe, which is not going to happen. So stay tuned. And once I do have a draft, and really it's a pretty complete draft for a pilot, other than the dollar amount, which is I assume the focus of negotiations in the town of Queensbury.
Thank you for that, Mr. Ullman. So we'll just keep this on discussion. Anybody else would like to add to that, or? Okay, let's go on to discussion item number 2, April 1st letters to the supervisors for the 420 exemption removals.
520.
What'd I say, 420? Oh, geez, I wonder what I was thinking.
I did, print out a copy of, if you guys want to share these amongst yourself, of letters that I typically would send.
Thank you.
These are letters.
Oh,
Oh, sure, there's,
no.
I think, a few there. Oh, we good?
Yeah.
Okay, so I typically send these letters out to all town supervisors that are affected by these. Where it says 000, that would be the amount that would be affecting your town. Extra money that would be coming in through these removed exemptions. There is a New York State real property tax law 520 that actually tells the town assessors that these need to be done or that they should be done. So some of you will get these letters this year and some of you will not. Some of the assessors have chose for some reason not to do them this year. Not sure why, but I'm not their overseer, so I can't force them to do these. That would be up to the town supervisors. So if you receive a letter, it is because your assessor did do these, and that is the dollar amount that would be in there that would get added to the tentative assessment roll. And then it will then go on and be collected next January. Those affect you. I do in my letter always recommend that you do reach out to the New York State Comptroller's office to find out how you should account for this money in your budget. I don't really believe a lot of you do that. But you know, again, it's not my place. So you guys can reach out to them and figure out if it really should be a line item in your budget because it is money coming in. Or you cannot. So I just wanted to make you aware that this is a law and these really should be being done. And I can give you some examples. So say somebody passes away and they have an aged exemption, and let's just say they passed away this February. From the date of their death going forward, the estate or whoever acquires the property is not entitled to their exemption per this law. So therefore, that money should be paid back to all entities that it affects. So not prorated, correct, from the date of the death till December 31st. So it would not just affect the towns. These numbers also affect the county. This money comes into the county, and there is some cases that it goes into the schools. So for the assessors that choose not to do this, they are also withholding funds from the county that should be returned to the county. I personally am just recommending that you all maybe talk to your town assessors to see if they are doing these or if they're not doing it, and if not, why? Because the county is entitled to this money as well, you know, on different levels based on, you know, your tax rates and the amount of time that's left. So I just wanted to point these out to you guys and make you aware that some are and some are not doing them, and some will receive the letter and some won't.
Chair, can I make a comment on that? I'm going to share my screen too.
Please.
Thank you. I want to pull up. I just did this a few minutes ago. I looked at this earlier. I really want to make a exclamation point here because I have some legal concerns. If the towns through their town assessors are not properly following the statute, because there's an impact not just on the town, right? There's revenue that under the tax code, the town is assessing when there's this loss of exemption. And it's not occurring, and that's a loss of revenue to the town, but it's also a loss of revenue to the county because it flows through to the county. The county can't go, my understanding, county can't go and put this exemption on the property when the property has lost, remove the exemption from the property so the property is paying the proper tax rate. In effect, towns may be acting in a very discretionary, free-flowing manner, allowing certain properties to pay less than what would be called their fair share or their assessed value rate under state law if these adjustments are not made during the course of the year. The end result is that funding for the county and for the towns is not being realized. And that's a problem. And that, from a legal perspective at the county level, it's a problem. And it's not a problem that I'm prepared to give an opinion on how the county fixes. My hope is, though, that the town supervisors today, tomorrow, or Friday will go back and check with their assessors and make a determination if are we following the statute or are we not following the statute. And as I've highlighted and put on the screen, the operative word is shall. It's not may or I don't wanna, it's shall. And I'm trying to be as firm and clear as I possibly can on this because it concerns me that there's different treatment potentially occurring to different county residents based on a potential preference that's being exercised in some municipalities as compared to others. That's all I had. Subject to any questions.
Question for the county attorney. Larry, if it's in fact law, would you consider sending us an opinion from the county that we all can have the standards for and share that with our assessors?
It's not necessarily my place to advise the towns on town operations. Potentially that could be part of my purview, but I walk reluctantly on that. I would ask the town supervisors to first have the conversation with the assessor. And if there's a difference of opinion, I would certainly follow up with your town attorney. And if this isn't something that can just be fixed, let me know. And then maybe the Board of Supervisors does want to direct me to provide an opinion for the purpose of the town's use. Because it's not what your town assessors do does not fall under the purview of county law. It falls under your purview as a municipality or a village.
Lexi, do you have an idea of how many of our assessors don't follow this?
It changes. I've had them doing them. This year I had 3 assessors that I know of that chose not to. I've had 1 assessor that chose to never do these. What happened is this law has been around for a long time. I don't know if it's been back 10 years or so. After I became the director, there was big conversation amongst the directors, as well as at a lot of the conferences, that this was something that when New York State came out, they were going to include in their audits that they do at the town, which would mean that this is something they could look into to see if it is being done at the town. And so at that point, it became a big push. So when that happened, that's when I made a big push at our local association to please start doing this, as well as here at the county. Tammy's shaking her head because she was part of this down in my office when we had discussions to how we were going to account for the numbers here at the county. So it became a big push and most people jumped on. However, at that time, I know I did have 1 assessor still reluctant and wouldn't jump on. I'm not quite sure why. They do not do the calculations. The calculations are done here at the town. We even do a letter that we give to them. It's kind of a generic letter, but with all their contact information on it that they could send to the people when they want to send out, say, for April 1st, to make them aware that this is going on to the tentative assessment roll. You do have a right to come in and grieve this amount if you have a problem with it. But the proof is all there. You know, I print out numerous sheets, go through a lot of paper at this time of year when I do them from, say, January through the March 1st timeline. I know that I thought I was done, submitted numbers, and then I had another two more come in. So I will be altering numbers that I've given to upstairs as well as to the treasurer's office to add those two on. But yeah, it comes down to, I can't enforce this, and it comes down to the assessors should be doing this or shall. So
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does July 1st come into play all on?
July 1st is final roll.
Right, but if anybody, let's say we, God forbid, but as senior guys after July 1st,
Mhm.
they are no longer subject to that exemption. So it should be back up to full value.
Would you like me to
Yeah.
speak to that?
Yeah.
So what happens is March 1st is taxable said status. Our calendar for real property is not a typical calendar year. We're March 1st through February, whatever it falls, 28th or 29th. So after March 1st, if somebody wants to squeeze one in March before they get to their tentative roll file, then yes, they could get it to me and we could get it processed and get it added on. However, say somebody died in the month of July, they should fill out, and there's a 520 form. They can fill that out. They can remove the exemption. They can notice the owner or whoever is going to be the owner of the property that this exemption was removed as of this date. You will be responsible for those taxes, from this date going forward. They would submit the application to me and it would go on the following year's tentative assessment roll. So yes, if they die in, say, July, they still will remove that exemption, but they won't pay back that money until the following. Well, it
Right.
wouldn't even be the following, it would be almost 2 Januaries out.
Yeah.
So, but we can go back 2 years to gather that.
And if I may follow up,
Please.
what's the resistance from the town assessors? And also I want to correct, you say that supervisors have oversight of town assessors. They don't, God does. Or, so.
I do not have any oversight over them. I have no control of what they do. We can guide them, we can make recommendations, but I am not their boss. I'm just the real property director that is mandated by the state of New York. So I cannot tell them how to do their job. I can only make recommendations. I have made this recommendation in the past. If they choose to continue to do them, that's great. If they choose not to, I can't do nothing to them other than ask them if anybody has any more that they want to submit, which I have done. I've sent emails out and said, one last chance. Does anybody have any more 520 exemption removals they would like to submit? If they submit them, I will process them. If they don't, I can't.
Chairman Garrity?
I've noticed it maybe in the last 3 years. It was brought to my attention by my assessor the last couple of years. I said, what is this? And he had a hard time explaining it to me. Now I understand it better. That we did receive some of this money
Yes, you have.
last few years, and I think I understand the concept of taking it. They must have been doing it
And
anyways.
it's not just if somebody passes away. It's if somebody
Well, it could be a
transfers the
military-
property as well. So if I sell my property to you and I had these exemptions,
Right.
you're not entitled to my exemptions. You may be entitled to the same exemptions on your own afford, but you would have to apply for them.
Hmm.
So that's where if you get those exemptions of somebody else, you have to pay them back.
I just think the separation, the money angle has just cropped up in the last few years, as far as my knowledge, maybe,
It's probably
but
been at least 5.
yeah, we've been seeing it up there, we'll get, oh, you're getting,
Mhm.
and I said, okay, what's this for now? They're doing it, but they just weren't explaining it properly now.
Mhm.
But they are taking exemptions off this. At least my assessor is, I believe.
Yes.
Anybody else? Lexi,
Thanks.
what about, since all the supervisors aren't here, of the towns and that, do we send something out, just a reminder on this? Because it's really a kind of a discussion item. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you're on top of it. Is that what we normally do, or?
Well, normally, if your town assessor is doing these, the town supervisor would receive a copy of this letter with the amount of the exemption removals that will affect the town. And when I send this, I always do send a copy of the real property tax law 520 along with it. So that is the only thing that I give to anybody. If their assessor is not doing them, they do not receive this.
Okay. So, there's no action we have to take here then?
No, I just wanted to familiarize everybody again with real property tax law 520.
Thank you.
Hey, and just to follow, so how does the county recoup their money then, and the towns? Does that run the rolls that you produce at the end of the year?
Yeah,
Have
so.
those included?
Mhm. So what happens is I go through and I calculate all of these out, dollar amounts for each parcel, put it in a spreadsheet along with all the paperwork back to the town assessors so that they then add it to their tentative roll. Tentative roll file comes to my office in April. I want to say it's around the 20th or 21st. For my office to then produce the tentative rolls for all of the town assessors, because they all file their rolls for May 1st for public viewing. So all of this would need to be on the tentative roll so that that person who is having this attitude does have the right to review that roll, and then they have the right to grieve it if they're not happy with the addition of this to their roll. It only goes on for the 1 year.
Okay.
And then, so it starts out, like I said, on the tentative roll, then it goes to the final roll. And then whatever billing that needs to be done, whether it be school, if it's the school, then it gets put on the school file. Or should I say it's produced on the school file when we produce the rolls and bills. And if it's town and county, it'll get on there in December for the January bill for the following year after it's added to the file. So.
All right. Any other discussion on that? Okay, we want to go to referrals and pending items.
Mhm.
We have the firefighter / ambulance workers exemption, RPTL 466-A. Lexi?
This we had brought through committee before. I just want you to know that we are still in the midst of working on this. We, as in my office, as well as the county attorney's office. We have met and reviewed this a little bit further. We had talked about coming up with a local law to be able to go before the board. So, for approval. I don't know, do we want to discuss any of the pinpoints?
Well, I guess the first point is there an intention to see this move through to the full board as a starting point? And then the question is going to be, there are some particular points or decision points that would need to be made as to what that would look like.
Well, to help.
Is there a timeline on this?
No, well, I mean, by the end of this year, I would assume, but yeah, there's nothing pressing in the next 30, 60, 90 days.
Do we have enough information to move it forward?
There's not enough information to vote today. I guess what I could do, Supervisor Gerasi, I think you had a question.
Question, yeah, to help us make a decision, do we have any idea what the financial impact would be on the county? Should all these exemptions?
That's an excellent question. I'll defer to the Director of Real
So-
Property.
I tried to gather that information I went through our emergency services, who then reached out to the local fire departments or volunteer departments, as well as the ambulance. And a response that I got from her is because I had created a certification form looking for, this is something that I had kind of came up with. Granted, stuff would have to be changed going forward, but I was hoping to use this as another county had shared with me what they provided. So I created something similar in hopes that the fire departments could fill this information out and share this information with us so that we would have an idea. And then I could have gone in and seen where, I don't know if I gave you one of these. Seen where these people lived, if they actually own the property, because it would have to be on their primary residence. Some of these members are younger, still live at home with their parents, so they would not be entitled to the exemption. Have they been a member? And that's something that we would have to determine. Are we going to use 2 years? Are we going to use 5 or somewhere's in between? But they were reluctant to share this information with me. So I only got information from a few of the departments. So unless I had that from everyone, I have no way of knowing how this would impact the county.
And just to add on to that, the additional piece is my understanding that the statute as it's currently written, and this might be changed in the future, it creates an either or with a personal income tax deduction that's available to members of these departments of $200. So they can take a $200 deduction, or they can take the deduction under this statute currently. I believe the Assembly and the legislature may be looking at that. I don't know how high on the list it is, and I'm not aware of where it is. But even if we had 100% participation in the census, each member has to make that individual determination of what's best for me. You know, so we might be able to say, what's the worst case, quote unquote, impact? I don't want to say worst case. What's the largest impact it would have if everybody took it? But arguably not everybody will take it for a number of reasons. An additional one being that individual personal income tax deduction. So maybe what I can recommend, I please ask all the questions you have, but the director of real property has spent a tremendous amount of time working with her colleagues around the state and providing me some of that information, which I greatly appreciate on this statute. But one thing we can do is maybe make a decision tree matrix for the next meeting that lays out all of the individual decisions that would need to be made in order to formulate the policy as a way to kind of move forward on it. As a suggestion.
Okay, Supervisor Leggett first.
The town of Chester is considering this, and the county would also have to come up with those 2 items that you had brought up here, Director Delury. How many years? Is it going to be 2 or 5 or to 5? And the percentage amount as well. And the town of Chester is doing the minimum years and the maximum deduction.
And if I could just add, it's going to be another layer of difficulty in doing annual certifications if municipalities in the county don't match up.
Mr. Smith,
Oh,
Supervisor Smith, sorry.
we just went through this in Johnsburg a couple of board meetings ago, and we had to rush it through because of the deadline. But to a man, the relief they got from something like this was dwarfed by the state's $200.
Correct.
So that they, even though we did it, nobody's going to take it. They're going to take the $200 from the state.
Okay. Supervisor Chairman, or Supervisor Chairman.
The town of Warrenburg passed this. We did it. All you have to do is very simple. Is get the fire department, give the roster to the assessor, and let the assessor look at. In our case, we had 21 members. And I think 7 of us would be eligible for this exemption. It's not going to be what everybody thinks it's going to be if you do it the proper way. And that's what we did. I gave the assessor the roster and said, look all these names up and see if they own their own homes. You're gonna find out that a lot of people think they own their own homes, but they don't, or they may be in different things. So I don't think it's that big of a deal if the fire departments would give the assessor their roster and say,
Right.
of the, plus you're supposed to be active. It's not supposed to be a giveaway. In our community, nobody is going to take this real property tax exemption, I can tell you right now. Because the amount of money that the value of your home times 10%. And it would have to be, every entity would have to pass the same thing. Lost money by taking this property tax exemption on mine, and I've got 53 years in there. So, it's not gonna be a big deal, but I do think there's a lot of noise on the state level to do more for volunteer firemen. So if communities want to go through the exercise, that's the easiest way to do it. Ask your fire district to give us a listing. Just give it to the assessor, let him browse the files, and you'll know it pretty quick, who's eligible. I mean, I've heard that, 35 members, so I'd like to see 35 members who are eligible to get something like this. Hooray for that outfit, that's all I gotta say. But it's a simple way of doing it, it's not a big deal.
Supervisor Stroud? Or just speak loud.
Well, just so that. Well, we have 5 fire departments
Yeah.
and 3 EMS squads, and there are active members and there's not. We do LoSAP, which is a retirement program. You have to earn at least 50 points, and you do that through responding to calls, working on equipment, doing training, and so forth. You have to earn at least 50 points. You're an active member. You're entitled to 1 year of LoSAP if you've done all that's required to get the 50 points. So I get a list of everybody that's listed as being a volunteer. Numbers are pretty high. Out of that list, perhaps 30 to 50% are active members. Now, there have been members who've been on that list for 5 years. And so you get LoSAP number of 0. Yeah, they're a volunteer, but they're not very active, if at all active. So do you give them 10%? So we're talking about this at the town level of letting LoSAP be the determination of who is active, and they would get the 10% break. So, but you have to have some definition of who's active. Otherwise, I'm going to join the volunteer thing to get 10% off my taxes. I won't do anything, but I'll just be a volunteer for 2 or
But you
5.
gotta own your home, John.
That is-
So, all right. So what I'm saying is you need to create a base or a definition of active before you determine who's going to get this benefit.
Thank you. Supervisor Leggett.
In the town of Chester, an individual would have to have a home $400,000 or above to be able to equate out to that $200 income tax credit. And I'm assuming this doesn't include special district exemption off of special.
The fire can pass a resolution as well, or they would be a resolution, whereas the town and the county has to be a local law, but the fire department could pass it and you could get it off the fire as well.
Fire, library, school.
Not sure. School, yes, but library, I don't know about that one.
I thought it was all taxing jurisdictions, but they all got taxed.
That would bring it down to 320,000 in the town of Chester.
Which is not hard up there in your neck of the woods.
So I would say that most volunteers have their houses, their homes assessed below that value. The impact would be negligible.
It's optics.
The statute also requires that it's the property is exclusively used for residential purposes and that it's the primary residence of the applicant.
And they must reside within the county.
Yep, in the county, yep. For purposes of the county reduction.
Okay, any more discussion on this?
Let's move it forward somehow on discussion here. Can we put on the parameters of the 2-year 10% and we do calculations based on that?
Well, this is under referrals and pending items, so do we? I'm not the chairperson, just the assistant today, but what? Do you have a suggestion?
I do. I will ask, I know tomorrow I do have an assessors association meeting that I will be attending. I will ask them to provide to me any list that they have received, because I only have gotten maybe 3 lists into my office. So if your town assessors have lists, please ask them to share with me, because I will not be able to calculate anything unless I know,
Okay.
who is considered active. And I can look at, we don't know, because it could be anywhere from 2 to 5.
Well, it was the
That's
fire chiefs that came to the town of Chestertown board and they did have a list. Not all of them were applicable.
Right.
But we can get those narrowed down.
Okay.
And we'll prepare up a decision tree of what the issues are under the statute that the county has to determine in passing. Because there are some other areas that get covered as well, retirees from the fire department or EMS service, spouses of a deceased firefighter or EMS worker. So there's other pieces to the statute. So we'll get that together for next month.
And to keep in mind, the whole intent of this is to encourage volunteerism.
Correct. All right, so we'll keep it on referrals and pending items. Okay, any more on this? All right, let's go back to privilege of the floor, public comment. I see none, so let's go for a motion to adjourn. Supervisor Grassi, Supervisor Smith, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.